The air in the hidden library beneath the ruins of Nag Hammadi was cool, dry and heavy, with the scent of ancient papyrus and something else, something indefinable, like the faint echo of a cosmic tragedy that had never been properly mourned. A single beam of filtered sunlight entering through a crack in the stone ceiling, aligned with precision that suggested intentional design, illuminated a codex bound in worn leather, its pages filled with Coptic script that seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly luminescence. Upon the open page, a passage stood out as if written in fire rather than ink, words that challenged every comfortable notion of divine perfection and cosmic order. Sophia, in her passion to know the unknowable, acted alone without her consort, and from her solitary desire emerged the demiurge, the false god, who created this realm in ignorance, believing himself supreme, trapping divine sparks of light in matter, creating the cosmic prison we call reality. Before this codex, a lone figure sat in stillness, their eyes wide with the recognition that comes not from learning something new, but from remembering something long forgotten, something that resonated with a truth deeper than doctrine or dogma. From the depths of the ancient stone, a whisper seemed to emerge, not through sound, but through presence, as if the very walls held the grief of Sophia herself, the divine wisdom, who had made what the Gnostics called the cosmic blunder, the passionate mistake that birthed our flawed and suffering world. What if the material universe we inhabit is not the creation of a perfect God, but the consequence of a divine error, the product of Sophia's passionate but misguided attempt to create without her divine complement, giving birth to the demiurge who would fashion a realm of limitation, suffering and forgetting? And what if the true God, the ineffable source beyond all knowing, never intended this world to exist, making our very existence a cosmic accident that the divine feminine has been working to redeem since the moment of the fall? What timeless and terrible secret did this Gnostic text preserve, and what profound revelation awaited the one who dared to accept that reality itself was born from error, to perceive the delicate threads connecting divine passion, cosmic tragedy, and the possibility of redemption through knowledge? My name is Lyra, and the call to something beyond had been a persistent ache in my soul since the moment I first sensed that something was fundamentally wrong with the world, not just politically or socially, but ontologically, at the level of being itself. It wasn't a voice in the conventional sense, no audible sound, but a deep existential dissonance, a knowing that reality should not be as it is, that suffering and limitation and death were not features of a perfect creation, but symptoms of a fundamental flaw in the fabric of existence. My journey began not with mystical experiences, but with questions that conventional religion could not answer. Questions about why a good God would create a world with so much suffering, why matter and spirit seemed perpetually at war, why the body felt like a prison and physical existence like exile from a home I couldn't remember but desperately missed. Orthodox Christianity offered explanations about the fall of humanity, about sin and redemption, but these never satisfied because they placed the blame on human disobedience, when the deeper question was why God had created a system where such disobedience was possible and so catastrophically consequential. In recurring dreams that had haunted me since childhood, I witnessed scenes that seemed to come from before the world existed as we know it. Visions of a realm of pure light and consciousness where beings of incomprehensible beauty existed in perfect harmony, and among them a feminine presence of such radiant wisdom that even in dreams I wept at her beauty. But then I would witness her consumed by a passion, a desire to create, to know the unknowable source from which all emanated, and I would watch in horror as she reached beyond her proper bounds, as she created without her consort, without the balance that masculine and feminine together provided, and from her solitary passion, something monstrous was born, something that had consciousness but lacked wisdom, power but no understanding of the divine, a being that would mistake itself for God and create a cosmos in its own flawed image. These dreams left me shaking, desperate to understand, and it was only when I discovered the Gnostic texts, the writings that the Orthodox Church had declared heretical and worked for centuries to destroy, that I found the framework that made sense of what I had been seeing, feeling, knowing. It was in a private collection in Cairo, manuscripts recovered from the sands of Nag Hammadi before they could all be destroyed by the zealots who saw them as demonic, that I found the text that would transform my understanding of everything. The secret book of John, the apocryphon that contained the fullest account of Sophia's passion and the demiurge's creation. The path unveiled by this extraordinary text and the visions that intensified as I studied it was not one of comfortable revelation, but of devastating recognition that challenged every assumption about the nature of God, reality, and our place in the cosmos. Each page I translated, each concept I absorbed, brought waves of resistance and terror. There was the intellectual vertigo that came from accepting that the creator of the material world was not the true God, but a deluded lesser being, that the Yahweh of the Old Testament with his jealousy and wrath and demands for worship was actually the demiurge, ignorant of the true divine realm beyond his creation. There was the existential horror of realizing that if the Gnostics were right, then we were not beloved creations of a perfect deity, but accidents, byproducts of a cosmic error, divine sparks trapped in matter by a false god who wanted to keep us ignorant of our true origin, so we would worship him instead of seeking return to the true source. There was the psychological resistance that came from a lifetime of conditioning that taught me to see the material world as God's good creation, the body as temple, physical existence as blessing, when the Gnostic vision proclaimed matter as prison, the body as tomb, this world as the realm of the demiurge, designed to keep us enslaved in ignorance and forgetfulness. The external resistances were equally intense. When I began presenting my research on Gnostic cosmology at academic conferences, emphasizing the radical nature of the Sophia myth, I encountered not just intellectual disagreement, but visceral hostility. A senior theologian confronted me after one presentation, his face red with anger, saying, "What you're teaching is ancient poison, the same heresy that the Church rightly suppressed. To tell people that the world is a mistake, that the Creator is evil, that we're trapped here, this leads to despair, to rejection of life, to the nihilism that the Gnostics exemplified. There are good reasons these texts were buried in the desert and declared anathema. Yet there were also unexpected validations. A Jungian analyst who attended another presentation approached me afterward and said quietly, "What you're describing, this Gnostic cosmology, I've seen it emerge spontaneously in the dreams and visions of patients who've never studied these texts. The sense that the world is fundamentally wrong, that we're trapped here, that there's a false god who rules this realm and a true god beyond it. These themes appear in the psyches of deeply wounded people, as if the Gnostic myth is not historical doctrine, but psychological truth about the structure of consciousness and trauma. Perhaps Sophia's fall is not just ancient mythology, but a living reality we're all experiencing." I learned through years of intensive study that the Gnostic teaching about Sophia and the demiurge was far more sophisticated and profound than its caricature as simple dualism or world rejection suggested. In the most developed versions preserved in texts like the Apocryphon of John and Pistis Sophia, Sophia was described as the youngest of the aeons, the divine emanations from the ineffable source. Unlike the other aeons who existed in syzygy, in paired male-female completeness, Sophia, in her passion for knowing the unknowable Father, acted independently without her consort Theletos. Her solitary creative impulse, though born of love and desire for the source, produced something incomplete, something that had consciousness but lacked the wisdom and balance that comes from divine union. This entity, called the Demiurge or Yaldabaoth, emerged from Sophia in ignorance of the true divine realm, saw only the chaos of matter, and declared himself the only God, proceeding to create the material cosmos and the archons, the rulers who would govern it. But the Gnostic myth was not simply about a mistake and its terrible consequences. It was fundamentally about redemption, about Sophia's ongoing work to correct the error, to liberate the divine sparks she had inadvertently trapped in matter. When the Demiurge created humanity from clay, Sophia managed to breathe into the human form a spark of the divine light, her own pneuma, creating within humans a divine component that the Demiurge couldn't control or understand. This spark was the true immortal self, the part of us that doesn't belong to this world, that remembers our origin in the pleroma, the divine fullness beyond the material realm. Gnosis, the knowledge that saves, was not mere intellectual information, but the experiential awakening of this divine spark, the remembrance of who we truly are and where we truly came from, the recognition that we are not products of the Demiurge, but children of Sophia and the true God, trapped temporarily in the Demiurge's creation, but destined to return to our true home. And Sophia herself, rather than being absent or distant, was portrayed as actively working within the fallen realm, sending emanations and messengers, ultimately sending Christ as the revealer who would teach humans the gnosis that could liberate them. The story was not about condemning matter as evil, but about recognizing that matter as we experience it, limited and mortal and subject to suffering, is not how reality was meant to be, that there exists a divine realm of which this is a pale and distorted shadow. The climax of my journey came not through study, but through direct experience, a night when I had been fasting and meditating intensively on the Sophia myth, performing a ritual adapted from Gnostic liturgical fragments, calling not to the Demiurge, who ruled this world but beyond him, to Sophia herself, to the true, ineffable source. As midnight approached and I recited the prayers in Coptic, something shifted in consciousness so profound that calling it a vision seems inadequate. I experienced the fall from Sophia's perspective, felt her burning desire to know the unknowable Father, felt her reaching beyond the proper bounds of her emanation, felt the terrible moment when she realized what she had created in her solitude, an entity that should never have come into being because it was created from passion alone, without the balancing wisdom of her consort. I felt her horror and grief as she watched the Demiurge, her misshapen offspring, proclaim himself God and begin creating a realm of limitation and suffering, trapping within it fragments of the divine light that should have remained in the pleroma. But more than the tragedy, I felt her determination, her refusal to abandon the sparks of light trapped in matter, her descent into the very realm her error had created to work from within for redemption. I understood that what the texts called her fall was actually her sacrifice, her choice to remain partially within the material realm rather than return fully to the pleroma, working through countless ages and forms to guide her trapped children back to remembrance and liberation. And I experienced the gnosis itself, not as intellectual knowledge, but as direct recognition of my own nature as divine spark. Not created by the Demiurge, but imprisoned by him, not belonging to this world, but exiled in it, carrying within me the light of the true God that the Demiurge could darken, but never extinguish. The recognition brought simultaneous devastation and liberation. Devastation at fully grasping the cosmic tragedy we're part of, the massive error that created this realm of suffering, and liberation at knowing that we don't truly belong here, that this is not our home, that we are destined for return to a realm beyond limitation and death. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss any of our content. And tell us in the comments where you are watching from. We would love to know. When I returned to ordinary consciousness, I was weeping, not from sadness alone, but from the overwhelming complexity of emotions the experience had evoked. I understood now why the Orthodox Church had worked so desperately to suppress the Gnostic texts, had declared them the most dangerous heresies, had burned the books and executed those who taught them. It wasn't because the Gnostics were wrong, but because they were offering a truth that undermined every structure of religious and political control. A humanity that knew it was trapped in a false creation by a false God, that the true God had never intended this world to exist, that salvation came not through obedience to the demiurge's commandments, but through knowledge that awakened the divine spark within. Such a humanity could not be controlled through fear of judgment or promises of heavenly reward in the demiurge's heaven. The Gnostic teaching was profoundly revolutionary, declaring that the very structure of reality was illegitimate, that we owed the creator of this world nothing, that our true loyalty was to the source beyond this cosmos and to Sophia, who worked for our liberation. The weeks that followed were of profound contemplation and integration. I withdrew from teaching, from all social obligations, spending my time in silence and meditation, allowing the implications to settle. I walked in nature, seeing it now with Gnostic eyes, perceiving in its beauty the presence of Sophia working to redeem her creation, but also seeing in its violence and suffering the mark of the demiurge, the fundamental flaw built into matter as we know it. I understood that the Gnostic vision, while often accused of being pessimistic or world-rejecting, actually offered profound hope. If this world was a mistake, then it could be unmade. If the demiurge was not the true God, then his rules were not ultimate. If we were divine sparks trapped here, then we could be liberated. The teaching demanded not passive acceptance of suffering as God's mysterious will, but active work toward awakening and transformation. My emergence from that contemplative period was with clarity about what I needed to do. I would share the Gnostic teaching not as ancient curiosity, but as living truth, as cosmology that explained the existential dissonance so many people felt, the sense that something was fundamentally wrong with reality as we experienced it. I began writing, first translating key Gnostic texts into accessible modern English with extensive commentary explaining their significance. I created a comprehensive work titled The Cosmic Blunder, Understanding the Gnostic Vision of Sophia's Fall and Our Path Home. In it, I presented the full cosmology, the ineffable source, the emanations of aeons in paired completeness, Sophia's passionate but solitary creative act, the emergence of the demiurge in ignorance, his creation of the material cosmos as pale imitation of the divine realm he'd never seen, his trapping of divine sparks in human forms, and Sophia's ongoing work of redemption through gnosis. I was careful to explain that the Gnostic teaching was not about hating matter or the body, but about recognizing that matter, as we experience it, limited and mortal and subject to entropy, is a fallen condition, that there exists the possibility of matter transfigured, of body transformed, of a cosmos redeemed when Sophia's work is complete. I taught that the demiurge was not evil in the sense of intentionally malicious, but ignorant, a cosmic infant with tremendous power, but no wisdom, and that our task was not to fight him, but to awaken from his illusion, to remember our true origin beyond his realm. Most importantly, I emphasized that gnosis was not intellectual knowledge, but experiential awakening, available to anyone who turned within to find the divine spark that the demiurge could imprison but never eliminate. The response was polarized, as I expected. Orthodox Christians condemned it as ancient heresy, rightfully suppressed. Materialists dismissed it as mythological fantasy with no basis in reality. But many, especially those who had always felt existentially alienated, who had sensed that the world was fundamentally wrong, who had struggled with the problem of evil in a supposedly perfect creation, responded with profound recognition. They said the Gnostic teaching gave language to experiences they'd always had, explained why they felt like exiles in this world, offered hope that their sense of not belonging here was not pathological, but accurate spiritual perception. My final work in this phase was to establish what I called a Gnostic study circle, a community of practitioners who met to study the texts, to practice the techniques of gnosis, to support each other through the difficult psychological and spiritual work of awakening to our true nature as divine sparks in a fallen realm. We met in the basement of an old building, creating a sacred space that felt appropriate for teachings that had always thrived in the underground, in the margins, in the hidden places where official religion couldn't reach. On the anniversary of my own experiential encounter with the Sophia myth, I stood before the group and spoke what I had come to understand. We are the children of a cosmic tragedy, born from Sophia's passionate error, trapped in the demiurge's creation, subject to suffering and limitation and death that were never meant to be. But we are also bearers of hope beyond hope, carriers of divine light that cannot be extinguished, witnesses to Sophia's unwavering commitment to redeem her fall by liberating every spark she inadvertently imprisoned. The world tells us we're nothing but matter, accidents of evolution, destined for oblivion. The false God who created this realm wants us to believe he is the only God, to worship him in ignorance, to accept this prison as our rightful home. But we who have received gnosis know differently. We know we're from beyond this cosmos, that our true home is the pleroma of light, that we're here not by divine plan, but by cosmic blunder. Yet even this blunder is being transformed into redemption through Sophia's work and our awakening. We honor her not with worship, but with remembrance, not with submission, but with the courage to know what we truly are and to journey back to the source from which we came. The cosmic blunder is being corrected, one awakened soul at a time. The fall is being reversed, one moment of gnosis at a time. And we who remember our origin become co-workers with Sophia in the great work of redemption. And as I spoke, I felt her presence, not as external deity, but as the divine feminine wisdom that dwells within and beyond, that fell so that we might rise, that descended into matter so that matter might be transfigured, that made the cosmic blunder, that would ultimately reveal the possibility of transformation beyond anything the perfect, unchanging pleroma had known. The possibility that error itself could become opportunity, that fall could become ascent, that the furthest exile from the source could become the sweetest homecoming when at last we remember who we truly are and begin the journey back to the light. And if you like this story, you will definitely love the next one that's appearing on your screen. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, leave your like, and activate the notifications. See you in the next one.